It is unusual that you would find 3 victims in such a close time frame. Usually when as we look back at history, when a serial killer starts or begins their killings, they will kill and then there'll be an extended period of time in between, which is really the definition of a serial killer as opposed to a mass murderer. So to start out with a spree, so to speak, is unusual, which, unfortunately, I'm sure the police are keeping their eyes open for other victims at this point, so looking at the history of the individual.
That probably does make you wonder, normally you don't start this quick, so it makes you wonder that there's not more out there.
Well, it would be curious. Again, most serial killers do not start with 3 victims in such a short time frame. Now, a mass murderer certainly would show up on one day and kill many people at one period of time. Serial killers tend to kill the first victim, period of time goes by, and then another victim. And that tempo increases over time as they learn. They get more comfortable with murder. And that's also how they're caught. They tend to make more mistakes as time passes.
And you also said he may have learned or took some Anthony Sowell maybe as his hero or something. I forget exactly how he worded it. But
mm-hmm. Well, we've had a lot of trainings this year at the University of Akron on crime analysis and specifically on profiling violent crime. I had a course earlier. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the training materials, we've trained police officers from all over the United States, or if you look at our textbooks for our coursework, they always have chapters on team killers, killers that appreciate each other's work, so to speak, and they get together. Charles Ng and Leonard Lake out in California, the Hillside Stranglers. There are whole chapters on individuals, and it's not unusual for a serial killer to appreciate, so to speak, the work of others. Now, whether or not this alleged killer's signature, so to speak, or the behavior that's represented from their crime scene is similar to an Anthony Sowell or another serial killer, it's probably not, but they might learn in terms of method of operation, MOs. MOs will change, behavioral signatures will not. Mm-hmm. So I think as we learn more about the alleged offender up in Cleveland, we'll see a little bit more about his particular signature if he indeed committed these murders.
And people ask why and what's going on in his head. Is there any explanation? Is it just...
Well, that's the question. As a social scientist, I'm a criminologist, as a social scientist that studies the cause and prevention of crime, essentially. I'm joined by other social and behavioral scientists and doctors, anthropologists that all ask these different questions. And there's various explanations, everything from traumatic brain injuries to child abuse when they were younger to cultural approaches to sexual equality. It's been studied from various angles. What we don't know is, why certain people even, why do certain people actually become violent? I mean, people with traumatic brain injuries or individuals that have been abused as children, not even most of them become serial killers. So I kind of explain it as a slot machine, if you will. The windows in the slot machine have to add up. Now, our personality traits tend to be on a continuum, if you will. We're all more aggressive. Some of us have more self-control and less self-control. Some of us are more dominant or submissive. Some of us are extroverted or introverted. If you line these particular windows up, like in a slot machine, you seem to have that certain set of characteristics that interact. And then you have an environment where there's opportunities present, which it appears that in the neighborhood in question there might be many opportunities, unfortunately, to victimize. There's a good target backlot. There are a lot of individuals that are there to be victimized, unfortunately. And that in criminology it's a very simple equation. When you have a motivated offender, an individual that has all those windows lined up, and then you have suitable victims and a lack of guardianship, whether it be a lack of police presence or just a neighborhood that doesn't have a high level of what criminologists would call collective efficacy or the ability to protect itself, or to look out for neighbors, you have kind of the perfect storm of that motivated offender, that person with that psychopathology seeking those victims that aren't necessarily protected by any other force, whether it be informal forces in the neighborhood or formal police forces, what have you.
When you look at something like this, people say prevention, or how could that have happened? How could that been stopped? It's probably almost one of those things that the person gets started and they have to get caught. Because how do you look at somebody and know this is the type of person that's going to become that?
You really can't, because these type of offenders have a wonderful ability to mask their behavior, and it's not, like we see on TV. They're not all genius offenders. The intelligence levels of your serial killers match the intelligence levels of the population at large, so they're generally of average intelligence. But we all, in our daily routines, wear masks in different circumstances. So, I was asked today if these people are monsters. I'm certainly that the victims and the victims' families feel that they're monsters, and we can kind of label that. But as a social scientist looking at this, trying to explain that behavior, they're human beings that are exhibiting extreme behavior, and believe it or not, much of what they're doing can be explained by what we all feel and go through in our day-to-day routines. It's more exaggerated, clearly, but when I'm frustrated with something, I might eat a few cheeseburgers or go to the gym. When that frustration builds in someone with that type of pathology or that personality, they're going to lash out. So I would take a look as they're examining the alleged offender. Was there a precipitator? Because usually you can find something that occurred, some significant lifestyle change that occurred that precipitated a violent outburst, divorce or death in the family, something of that nature. Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about the area. It's a rundown area, a lot of empty homes. Is poverty something that plays into all of this, or is it just that's the place to go if you're looking for that?
Well, predatory offenders, including multiple murderers, are going to seek their victim type, and they all have different types of victims. But again, it gets down to the question of opportunity. And you're going to notice if you look at various serial killers, they are going to pick targets of opportunity, so to speak, or victims of opportunity, I should say. Prostitutes, runaways, college campuses, where students might take liberties with their personal safety. Those are big targeted areas. And certainly neighborhoods that are impoverished have less of a capability, I think, to defend themselves than perhaps other neighborhoods that would have more resources. You're looking at just more of an opportunity space, if you will. Criminologists study crime in place because the environment in which a crime occurs is very meaningful. It's very telling. And it comes right back down to opportunity. Do they have the opportunity to find an empty house that they can pull someone in and assault or murder or dump a body? Yes, there are foreclosed houses in impoverished neighborhoods. Are individuals in that particular neighborhood, again, looking out for each other? Okay, or is it a more disorganized neighborhood where you kind of go home or stay home and lock your doors, and you don't necessarily know what your neighbor's doing or wouldn't recognize a stranger coming in? Mm-hmm. And we found out that in many cases these weren't even strangers; these are people that have lived there for quite some time. But it's a different culture in which you're not necessarily noticing something that's unusual, perhaps. So it's about opportunity and environment that does play into it. I've not been to the neighborhood, so I couldn't say that was the case there. But if we look back at history and case studies, certainly it's an opportunity that's fertile for predators.
And the other thing, it was the fact that it's happening in the same area, Sowell and him. Castro was a little different. It was 10 years ago when he didn't kill them, but people, was there something going on here, or is this just happened to be a random spot of two big crimes?
Well, statistically, serial killers are rare. I think if you look at the number of heroin overdoses in Ohio and in the United States this year, you're going to have far more of those than you're going to have victims of serial killers. Less than 100 operating in the United States, according to the FBI and other researchers. So the likelihood of coming across a serial killer, very rare, very unlikely, despite their prevalence in the media, entertainment media, and news media. We're fascinated by people like this. Castro, again, unusual, sexual, coercive, did not murder, clearly. Statistically rare. But it's happening in the same neighborhood. I would ask environmental questions about the neighbors. Certainly could be simply coincidence.